Hey, 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 we are live. Sorry for the delay. We've had some technical issues, but it's all good now. Welcome to another episode of VC Podcast brought to you by Vanguard Connect and 20 Something Podcast. As always, our aim is to empower and educate listeners on issues pertaining to African Caribbean communities. I'm your host, Naomi Simon, and joining me as co-host is Peter Adefiyoye, also the founder of Vanguard Connect. Hey, Peter.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. Did you want to do a few shout-outs, sir?
Firstly, I wanted to say apologies for the delay. Technology can be our best friend as well as our worst enemy. And without further ado, I don't want to waste any more time. We can get into it.
Thank you. Okay, so join us. Don't forget to tweet us, hashtag VC Podcast. Let us know your thoughts. Peter will be reading out your tweets throughout the podcast. Okay, so let's start. This week we'll be discussing the Kenya Garissa University massacre, corporate diversity, volunteering in Africa, the white superiority complex, the Nigerian and UK elections, and the Black British civil rights movement, if there is one. Oh, that's what we're discussing. So let's introduce our speakers. So if I could start off with Shante.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hiya. Do you want to introduce yourself and say a bit about what you do?
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Shantae. I'm on my gap year. I'm interning at the Bank of England. I currently act as Vice Chair of Trustees for the British Youth Council. We're a charity run by young people for young people. So we run the UK Youth Parliament, the Young Mayors Network, and have a membership of about 253 organisations. So that's local youth councils and parliaments across the whole of the UK. And I'm also part of Team V, and we're currently running a Swing the Vote campaign. So it's basically just encouraging young people to register to vote and actually show up to vote. So you can tweet hashtag Swing the Vote, or you can tweet at League of Young Voters, and just encourage people you know, and if you haven't registered yourself, register to vote.
Thank you. Big things. Chidi?
Right, hi everyone, good evening. I'm a fourth year medical student at King's College London. Apart from that, I have a great interest in politics. Most of you have seen me at various events, and I generally post on Facebook as well. And apart from that, I also set up a free school, which is running now. I'm also into tutoring, so I tutor a lot. And I'm just into kind of improving the lives of those around me, educationally and politically.
Great.
That's about it for me.
Thank you. And Carl?
Good evening, everyone. My name's Com. I'm a second-year historian at the University of Oxford. I'm also the Vice President of Oxford University ACS. As far as my experiences relate to the topics today, I've been on one of these infamous voluntarist gap year things people are talking about. I spent 3 months in Ghana for the Department of International Development, which was quite interesting, but we'll get into that a bit more later. I've also been the poster boy for rare recruitment, having been through the Target Oxbridge program, been through their professionals program, so we can talk a bit more about that as well. And right now, I run a number of organizations for the African Caribbean community in London, namely Brother and Sisterhood UK, and I'm part of African Sons and Daughters, both of which focus on education of Black history as a cornerstone to the development of our African and Caribbean communities. So I hope to add most to those kind of topics, but I'm interested to learn about everything else as well today.
And Mel?
Yep, I'm Melissa, and I'm a third-year politics and philosophy student at the University of Leeds. I used to be a member of the UK Youth Parliament, one of the things that Shantae spoke about with the BYC. I also have been on one of the volunteerism trips. I went to Tanzania and Kenya last summer, so I can talk a bit about that. And I've also recently been elected as the new education officer for Leeds University Union.
Thank you. Again, big things. And also joining us for the first part of this VC podcast is Sylvia and Ivy. They are both young people who have both lived in Kenya and are currently studying in the UK. Am I right, Sylvia?
Yes.
Great. And could you tell us a bit about what you do also?
Okay. Hi, I'm Sylvia. I'm a third-year law student at the LSE. And currently I've been working on a project with a couple of friends back home over the last few years called Girl. It's an empowerment and mentorship program where we just work with a lot of young girls in the slums in Kibera just trying to sort of empower them, give them a lot of tips, set up a lot of events for them to meet a lot of people in different industries. That's what we've been working on, and aside from that, just my law degree.
Cool, good stuff. And Ivy, lastly.
Hey, I'm Ivy. I'm a final year law student at Leeds Uni, and I was treasurer for East African Society. That's just about it. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so let's start. Let's get straight into it. I'm going to start off with the Kenya massacre. So on April 2nd, 148 university students in Garissa, Kenya, were slaughtered to death by a terrorist group known as Al-Shabaab. So in the days afterwards, there was 3 days of a mourning and a distraught and traumatized community. And so we're sending out our thoughts, our prayers, and our positive energy. And as well as that, we are here to discuss what the aftermath has been and what this means to the wider community and to Kenya itself, and how the coverage of this incident has played out in mainstream media. So I just want to start by asking Sylvia and Ivy, you're Kenyans. I'm not sure how much communication you've had back home since this has happened, but what do you think has been the effects of this attack since it's happened on April 2nd? Maybe Sylvia, if we could start with you.
Okay. So I think the main thing for me was, firstly, that I found out all about this just through social media, waking up that morning and looking at CNN. And at first I wasn't sure if it was really true or not, so I called my mum at home and she told me that was what had happened, and subsequently I just followed a lot of the news live streaming online to see what was going on and what the coverage was like at home. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it has sort of, from my experience, because I was at home last year when the Westgate attack happened, it's sort of just been the same as the whole Westgate thing for the first week or so. I mean, loads of the local television stations just had it running almost 24 hours all day, covering what was going on. But I think the main thing is the response has, personally to me, been exactly the same as what happened in Westgate, in that it's just been a thing of, yes, we've raised a lot of awareness about this is the gruesome attack that has happened, but really and truly whether or not the groundwork within society and within our government, within politics, you know, if those changes have really been made, I have not seen anything since the Westgate attack, which is sadly why something like this was able to happen again at a much larger scale. And clearly it's showing there's a lot of gaps within our political system right now, some aspects within our society that we really need to address in terms of just awareness, understanding. So, because in terms of the community coming together to sort of help out at this time, that has definitely been there, and that is something that I would expect no less of people right now at this time. But I think the main thing has sort of just been towards the fact that Westgate happened. We commemorated all those who passed away in Westgate, the 67 that died, and then thereafter the Westgate was closed down and sort of everyone went back onto their normal lives. Nothing was really addressed and talked about thereafter. There was no dialogue opened. So I think that's the main problem.
Sorry to cut you. Do you think, in terms of coverage on a wider scale, say internationally, there has been, say, a difference between the Charlie Hebdo incident that happened only a few months ago in Paris and the incident the massacre that just happened in Kenya? Do you think there's been a difference? And Ivy, please feel free to come in.
I feel like the coverage, although the people would be comparing the two and be like, oh, in the French one there was much more coverage and it was by the hour, but the thing is there's a lot more that goes into it other than just, because even the local stations would say, you know, there's a lot that goes into it. It is far away, you'd have to send in journalists, you'd probably have to fly them there, you have budgets to consider, so it's not really they care more about French people than, you know, than Kenyan students, sort of.
But do you think there's sort of hypocrisy in the fact that African leaders travelled to Paris to pay their respects? And I'm not sure if the same has happened in Kenya.
Yeah, I can definitely. So this is the one thing that has definitely really angered me about the situation. Firstly, I think the thing we ought to remember about the Je suis Charlie was a lot of the Western leaders all came together as a community in Europe and supported each other. The first thing is, if you look at what happened in Kenya, first of all, our own president himself has not flown up to Garissa to actually personally go and see what has happened at the university. At most, you've seen a condolence nationally online. You know, he's done a public broadcast and signed a few letters to the families, which, if you honestly think about this as a leader, I personally found that to be not a sufficient enough response to the situation. Secondly, as a continent in itself, you know, just a response of loads of different African leaders coming together and pulling together, we've really not seen that. And I think this is something you can even see with all the recent attacks that have been happening in Nigeria. It's somehow that we're all just very quite dissociated and all in our own little bubbles, in our own little nations, and there's sort of that lack of coming together as an African community, whereas we definitely saw that in the Je suis Charlie. In Paris, they all came together, all the leaders, and sometimes you realize at that point it was more about the level of organization and what was expected from the government in France and what they were expecting from the international community. I think the problem here is Kenya hasn't really set the tone on what they're expecting from the international community. Aside from that, if you even look at what has been shared on social media, a lot of people kept sharing images of loads of students massacred on the floor and of people shot at the back of the head. There was not a single photo like that shared in Paris when there was that incident as well. I think that's the main issue, that I personally feel that it's as if these lives are being completely dehumanized, and just why are we sharing photos of carcasses? If we truly care about the fact that lives have been lost, we should be just commemorating that and remembering that. We don't need to see what exactly happened in the massacre, how exactly people died.
Exactly.
If I can take us back to what you said, Sylvia, I beg to differ on a couple of points. First of all, I don't think that the government response has been slower than it was in Westgate, because as much as in Westgate it lasted 4 days, but they managed to do this one faster in one day. Aside from the fact that there was problems and it took longer than it should have, but there was much more coordination, which was a problem with Westgate as opposed to this first instant. So you can see that some things have changed from Westgate to now, because the other one was 4 days.
Yes.
And I would say, and going back, that is a good point, and I wasn't aware of that either. But I would say, going back to the point of showing these the dead victims, these dead black bodies, and promoting that, I don't ever remember seeing a picture. I don't remember the BBC World ever showing a picture of any 9/11 victims lying dead, any 7/7 victims, any Charlie Hebdo victims. So I do think we have to acknowledge a hypocrisy there. And I also think we need to evaluate why they would do that. Why would they show dead Kenyan bodies, dead black bodies, dead African bodies, and not show these dead European or American bodies? And perhaps it's necessary, and Carmen, and I would invite the rest of the speakers to come in here, is that there's a level of cognitive dissonance that's going on within these media outlets that has them reasoning that, okay, it's okay to show these dead bodies because perhaps their lives aren't worth as much because they're over there, they're different to us. And you can come in and disagree with me, but that's what it really says to me as why there's such disparity in the news coverage.
I don't agree with that. I think the problem is just ethical media. It's not a thing of thinking, oh, they're less value. Those images were dispersed to Kenyans. It's just that they got the attention of the international communities, but it was for Kenyans, and it's not saying that they are worse. It's just a problem with ethics, ethics.
I think I have to echo Ivy on that. I think the problem is also sort of the ethical code sometimes that our media in Kenya, I can't speak for other areas, might have, in that there are times when we've seen that they'll put out too much and realize that perhaps has been an issue, that that's also desensitizing the wider society into what they're seeing, and might have to retaliate that or either defend it. And I think sometimes I would just say that on that part, that is an issue. I felt that perhaps even the media themselves, they had the opportunity to share other images as well and really try to counteract that, but it was something that was just further fueled. I felt that was a platform they could have stepped up and really provided different images, because majority of the images we were just seeing was either what was provided by international media houses, by CNN, BBC, and it was the same videos, the same images coming out, but not enough that our own media houses could brought out. And the thing is, they do work hand in hand with a lot of these international media houses, so we cannot say that they don't have the ability to also plug into the kind of platforms that CNN and BBC have.
I think from a Western perspective, I definitely agree that there's a significance in the disparity of the way they represent these images in terms of us just being laid out like cattle, just slaughtered. I mean, you wouldn't see that in terms of their victims or for these kind of terrorist attacks. They don't do that, and I think they're able to do that because of the way they control the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
For them, this isn't something that's out of the ordinary. This is just an extension of the quote-unquote typical barbaric tribalism of Africa, except these times is this along religious lines rather than ethnic ones. So for them, this is Rwanda, this is Nigeria, this is normal, which isn't the case. But that's the way they try and portray it in the imagery that they use. And I think that the way they show these images about censorship to remove the dignity is something that we should definitely be taking note of. But I think what is amazing is the use of social media that has been utilized in response to these types of narratives. You know, there's this campaign, I think it's called More Than Just a Number, where they're trying to add faces and backstories and names to all the 147 victims who have been targeted. And whilst we don't have any control of the major media outlets, it's a good way that we can try and respond and reclaim our narratives and actually add some context and rehumanize the people that, that are concerned by these attacks, because they don't do that when it comes to their victims, and it's important that we give life back to our own people.
I definitely, can you hear me? Yeah. I definitely agree with Calm in the sense that only black bodies are shown in such a way in the media. Like, even if you can kind of draw parallels with Walter Scott this week as well. I don't think we ever would have seen a video of a white man being shot in the streets, even in the West. For example, Lee Rigby, his killing was probably available through. So that could have been shown on social media, but we would have never seen something like that. And I think it kind of just I've lost it. But it does just kind of show black people as items to be consumed by the West, and shows our barbarism in the. Oh, sorry.
No, I definitely think they're creating an ongoing stereotype. Definitely. Were you going to say something, Khan?
No, I was just saying I'm in total agreement with everything that was said. Yeah.
Definitely. And Shantae, what are your thoughts on this?
I feel the same, and I feel like that's why the whole idea of Black Lives Matter is so important, because you would just never see that if it was somebody else. But whenever it's Black lives or it's black people, there is no shame, there is no sort of second guess or trigger thought before you post something. That is quite humiliating, and it is something that really distresses me. And I feel like it's really weird because social media has been quite positive and negative in it, in the sense that, you know, the reason why so many of us know these stories, and for example, when the 3 Muslim people were shot in their homes, the whole reason why we knew that is because of Twitter, because of social media. We saw it online before we saw it on the news, and it's really powerful that we hear that. But at the same time, these really horrible, damaging images, and I mean, a lot of people say that they're desensitized to it, but every time I see something like this show up on my timeline, it is very distressing, and how casually someone will post it. And I know that sometimes people don't post it with malicious intent, but they show it to say, you know, this is something terrible that's happening, but what they don't realize is they're kind of playing into almost a bigger problem of showing that Black lives don't matter, essentially. So yeah.
And we're not here to tell anybody off or say what you should or should not do. We're simply just analysing what these things mean in the broader sense. So maybe it's when you are posting things on social media, to evaluate before you post it and think what message is this sending out, and what is the subconscious message that this is sending out.
And like
Sorry, go on, Shinte.
I'm like, and I think it's even more. I think when you were, I mean, I know we kind of swayed away from the idea that we should draw parallels between what happened in Kenya and what happened in France. But even if you look at the Charlie Hebdo case, this whole idea of satire pointed at marginalized communities when satire should really be pointed at people in a position of power, because that's what it's there to do. And what they were doing was essentially bullying. And I feel like a lot of people kind of ignored that whole aspect to it, because it was bullying. When you try and make fun of marginalized groups in society, you're not proving any sort of political point. You're bullying them, and I think that is very dangerous, and everyone kind of ignored that fact. And I think even if you looked at their other posts and their other magazines and their other covers, they were really quite horrible things. And I think that we completely ignored that whenever we look at any sort of massacre incident that happens in the West. But whenever it's a different place, whenever it's somewhere that isn't in the West, we like to kind of point out the other issues that are going on, and we kind of dehumanize the situation. And that's one way I would say that we can draw parallels, or we can draw kind of contrast between what happened in Garissa and what happened in France.
Most definitely. Most definitely. So,
and just to butt in here, if I can, very briefly, we've had a comment on Twitter from Busayo Twins saying we should put pressure on mainstream media, but we know they don't rate us. Let us have closer connects to African media.
I feel like aside from the media coverage and everything, the main problems that we have are just government responses to terror attacks and the failures of our security system, and the situation with the Somali refugees, because now they want to send them away within 3 months, which I find to be ridiculous.
Definitely.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Go ahead, Chidi, go ahead.
Right, yeah, so we've heard a lot about the different killings, and a lot of parallels have been drawn between the two. And whilst I do agree that perhaps the media and governments do have a role to play, just not to play devil's advocate, but just to flip things around a little bit, should we really rely on the government, or on a government, or on a media source or outlet to be the ones painting a positive image of all communities? Should we really be the ones relying on them? After all, it's not in their mandate to do so. I feel as though those that were posting the images, majority of them actually were black people, posting images of the Kenyans who were massacred and so on. It wasn't something that I saw my white friends doing, and it was just a shock of, oh, what's happened? What's this? How can this be happening? And it seemed at the time as though the majority of people that were doing this were people who looked just like me and you. So my question is it really the responsibility of media and government outputs, so on, to control?
I definitely agree with what Chidi has to say on that. I think something about this whole situation also that is just something that maybe not of us, is that the fact that personally, in terms of, if this was something where it was your brother or your sister, or it was your friend at that university or something, I think people would be so much quicker to not want to share those photos and images, because I'm personally thinking that if it had been a car accident where my father had died or something, and everyone on social media was just showing pictures of his dead body lying there bleeding out, I mean, I really would feel so hurt about that. And I think the main thing, which is one thing that a couple of friends and I, she has a blog and she does a lot of vlogs as well, but she did this really good video, and it was just talking about that if we really want to support and show our support and say that we care about these people and really sympathize with a lot of the families that are going through this tough time, yes, do what social media has been doing personally, that people share pictures of these people when they were alive, messages about them, but you don't need to share the gruesome things. I don't think we need to wait for the government to do these things, because as we're saying, our social media and the rate at which information is passing through on social media is much faster than the rate at which these media houses and our government can respond and put things out there. But we have the ability as individuals to do that, and I think if we look at how much power we have as an individual, that is really something I think I would personally love to just tell everyone, be more cognizant about when you post things. Just think that a lot of people have been complaining that, we need to put more out there, but I'm thinking maybe just because it wasn't us personally, no one actually had an individual that maybe passed away. I can say I didn't have a personal friend there, but if it had been that, people might have had a completely different response if they really had that interaction.
The question that raises is, do we have to have a personal relative there for us to care?
No, I don't think we have to, and I think the thing is even if you don't have a personal relative, just always think about these situations if you were that family right now, because at the same time is sometimes people are feeling, okay, we need to put the gruesome photos out so that, you know, we never forget. But imagine for the family, that person that died, they will never be forgotten.
That's
So
right.
just because we forgot, because we might be apathetic and we're able to go back to our lives, you know, doesn't mean that for somebody else, their life is completely shattered. There's been a father who lost a child. I was reading an article. He lost his child in riots a couple of years in Nairobi University, and then now he lost his other son, his only other child now that was left at Garissa. So for him, his life is completely changed. And I think the thing is just to stand with them and just show that you're supporting them. But you may not necessarily have had that own personal impact in your life, but realize that for somebody else out there, there has been that personal impact. And I think it's just to also be respectful to the families out there right now, because they're just so grief-stricken that they can't respond and be online and be able to share their message and say what it is they want to say. But it's for us to sort of stand in that gap for them and try and put that positive light out there.
And if I can button very quickly, we have a few tweets and messages. We have one from Adam Zedabor who says, using media can lead to a technologically induced fetishism where people imagine that they are changing the world. We've got a tweet from Afolabi who says, quick question, does anyone know why the Al-Shabaab terrorist group is targeting Kenya? Is the government's actions against its people's will? And we've got another one from Sienna saying, it's symptomatic of a wider issue of seeing black people and Africans as unequal, not quite human.
Exactly. Okay, so we're going to have to move on. Thank you for tweeting, guys, and keep on tweeting. And I think, Sylvia, you did raise a good point there in your last statement about we're going to have to be the ones to have these media outlets ourselves, so we are putting out the images that need to be seen. And the images that need to be seen, in my opinion, aren't dead black bodies, and I think we've discussed why that is. But let's move on now to the next issue of corporate diversity. Sorry, Sylvia and Ivy, thank you for joining us. I know you're going to leave us there. Thank you for your input.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say very briefly, it was so important to get voices from students who grew up in Kenya on this podcast for that particular topic, and we got that advice from many or quite a few of our vanguard. So thank you for some of our members for suggesting such. And again, Sylvia and Ivy, thank you for joining us for that particular segment of this podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so the next part is corporate diversity, and so this topic sort of transcended the original post, and we're going to talk a bit about corporate diversity and companies like SEO and Rare, and their impact in creating banks, top banks, consultancies, law firms. Okay, so the question remains whether SEO and Rare, and Rare, they're organizations which help to put top students, and by top students, that's a bad choice of words, I mean students who are attaining high grades and who are getting into good or top ranking universities into these top firms. And so the question remains as to whether, if they are targeting these students and getting these students into those top firms, is there diversity at all if all those students have already those good grades? And I think it would be wise to start with you, Chidi, please.
Okay. Could you just reiterate the question, please?
Is there diversity at all if the students that they're putting in, those black students that they're putting in, already have top grades?
Top grades are oftentimes elite. Okay. Well, first of all, we live in an unequal world. First of all, I don't mean to sound sort of pessimistic or sort of down or anything. So it is a world where oftentimes your educational ability and how well you do in school oftentimes will be decided by factors that you don't have control over. So how much money is in the family, where you live, where you grow up, the kind of friends you kind of interact with. And those are some of the things that can't really be affected by, how would I put this? It can't really be affected by you, as in you don't have much input in those sort of things. So the phenomenon of certain companies having the top creme de la creme just goes to serve with that sort of idea.
Okay. And definitely, and Khan, Would you agree?
I find it problematic. If I'm going to address the question directly first, which is are we really producing any diversity in these firms when we're only attacking the top academic performers, right? I'd say, first of all, just because you have top academic grades or you go to a good university doesn't really compensate for some of the other disadvantages you have coming from certain backgrounds. So the kind of human capital in terms of the connections you have in certain firms to get into certain places or to know what industries are about, your parents or your uncles or someone might not have gone through any of these city type of practices. So you don't have those extra experiences that you need to set yourself apart from your white counterparts or others. So in terms of that, these diversity firms do help and develop candidates in that sense. They do widen the pool of opportunities in that sense. Granted, from a very narrow sector of industries as well, which is another problem. But they do develop candidates, I won't attack them on that. I won't praise them for it either. I mean, just because they're not foes to us, that doesn't by default make them friends. So let us remember that first of all, because I feel as if some of the time, the most problematic thing about these firms for me is the way in which they approach us. They come as if they're friends and they're helping the community and things of that nature, when the way I see it, we're commodities to them just as much as we're commodities to any of the firms that they work for. They need us as part of their business structure or their charity structure, whatever it is, to get their numbers up and get the continued funding. So let's just remember that, yes, they're helping us in a way, but it's part of their business plan. They're not doing us any altruistic favors or anything like that. But I think that the idea that we should be thinking about how much are they really diversifying our community and supporting us and moving things forward is a confused one, in the sense that, for me, that corporate diversity was never supposed to be an ethically driven initiative. It's a profit-driven initiative. I mean, diversity doesn't seek to address the symptoms of inequality. I mean, it addresses the symptoms, but it doesn't seek to address the causes. Diversity says we want more black faces in white spaces. It doesn't say we want to address the systemic socio-economic issues which dictate the quality of our education, which affect our human capital and account for the discrepancies between the white and black achievement. They're just dealing with direct racial discrimination.
Sorry, Calm, can I challenge that?
Yeah, please.
Would you say it's in the remit of companies to address those sort of inequalities? Is it in the remit of companies? I'm not saying it's a bad thing for them to do so, but this ever-expanding remit of companies to sort of balance inequality in society, be the parent, be the provider, ever-expanding job role of companies. Do you think it's in the company's remit, and should it be in their remit, to establish equality racially?
Okay, well, this is the thing. So long as they claim to be caring about, attracting the most diverse talent pool, so long as they have these diversity initiatives, these corporate social responsibility initiatives, we should hold them to account on that level. But if you're talking on a practical level, is it their job to do that? Is it in their interest to do that? No, they're not. I mean, I've dealt with a number of firms in my role of sponsorship for my society at university. All these firms claim to be about diversity, and they want talent regardless of color or class and things like that. But 9 times out of 10, if you sit them down and have a real one-on-one, they'll tell you that diversity is not just in our interest, it's a necessity, because we're in a global economy. We're expanding into emerging economies, and our clients want people who look like them. They'll all tell you that exact same line, right? And the fact of the matter is, they're trying to sign up people who speak their native language so they can ship them to the overseas offices. No, we're all laughing, but that's the real demand. They want us to be head of the Africa practice. They're not trying to allow you to become MD in London. They're not trying to send you there. They're trying to send you overseas so you can make headway for them, because what they're trying to do now is corporately colonize Africa all over again, and they want you to be the front man for that. That's what diversity means to me.
I completely agree.
Wow, that is big. Who wants to call me Melissa?
Yeah, I completely agree with Calm. They're doing it for themselves. It's a business, and the companies need to be diverse. So they're just pulling the top black students from across the country to give to these companies, and these companies are paying them back. But I think if they really wanted to help the community, then there'll be a lot more diverse lines of work to go down. For example, in the UK, there's only like 17 black female professors. And academia is a massive space where black people are massively underrepresented, but because no university or no company is paying them any money to help black students get into academia, they're just focusing on these narrow set of corporate jobs. And as well, I think that makes students who are black and are at the top universities, most of them would have heard of Rare, SEO, all these other companies, and that makes them want to go there and not choose a different kind of career path, because they see that as the best, and they see that Rare wants me, so I'm gonna go and do what Rare say instead of trying a different career path.
Wow, I've never thought about
it. Briefly, to just read a few tweets. Sorry, We've got one from Hannah Okorafor. Thank you for your tweet, Hannah. She says, it illustrates the problem with the corporations themselves that want diversity, but still want to hit a certain criteria. Dara Curtin spoke about diversity being multifaceted, and SEO and RARE are just focused on ethnic diversity.
I think it's also important to remember that, you know, I think, so I may be wrong, but SEO and RARE, they're charities, right? And I guess it's a charity.
I believe SEO is a charity and RARE recruitment's a business.
Okay, so I guess in SEO sense, you know, I guess charities have limited resources. I think they have to meet targets, and I guess there is a lot to take into consideration when you think about these things. But also, you know, if you want to survive as a charity, a lot of things have to get pushed aside. And I feel like perhaps how diverse they outreach, so whether or not they're actually getting diversity of thought, so, you know, stopping companies from having groupthink, perhaps that's not quite their remit, and perhaps it's about, you know, are we making sure that these companies look different rather than think different?
Definitely, and I hadn't thought about any of, especially what Khan was saying, at all, and that just poses a question. Then, Khan, is it ethical for us if that is true, and we know that, should we be working for these companies?
Okay. Now that's a whole different question. Right. I feel that if you're going to work for these companies, there are certain skills and experiences they can provide that we can take and, you know, help our communities develop. I don't think that we should ever be under the illusion that we're going to get to a point one day where we have just as many BME people in the board of directors as we have white people, and that all of a sudden the agendas of the firms are going to change, you know, for our benefit, because I don't ever see that happening. It's not practical. It doesn't make sense for their business. You know, they need to have some people on the bottom. So I don't think we should be under that illusion, but that doesn't mean that as individuals we can't take certain experiences and skills from these companies and transfer it into our communities. I know a number of people that have worked for firms, these corporate firms, and then went to go and start initiatives in Africa or even in the West for the benefit of their communities. So that can happen. The only thing I would say in relation to SEO and RARE, to be fair to them, is that they don't only have the professionals program. You know, the SEO does have the scholars program, which they work with younger students, and RARE does have the target schools program, which they're working with now, where they're trying to support students from a wide range and a variety of backgrounds, not from certain schools and stuff, just to help them become more well-rounded candidates. So when it comes to applying to university, obviously to some extent that's a pipeline into their professionals program later on as well, which is also a problem. But they are affecting wider change, not just specifically in that area. So I think I would be fair to them and say that as well.
To butt in very briefly, Ruth Muketa sent a question in, and she said, would these students, and in fact I want to direct this at each and every one of us who's been through SEO or RAIL both in this chat, would we, with these great grades, be successful without organizations like RAIL and SEO? What do you guys and girls think in particular?
Yes.
Just like that.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like my sister just got what do you even call them? A grad scheme with JP Morgan, but I'm 100% sure through SEO. But I'm 100% sure if she had done it herself, she would have got it. And I've been able to get on a good few internships. But one of the things with the internships is that some internships are only allocate them to BME students. With those ones, I accept. Okay, I wouldn't have gotten them, because they wouldn't have been there without companies like the Windsor Fellowship, SEO, etc. But otherwise, I do think that we do have the ability to do it ourselves.
I don't know. I'm going to say that I definitely believe we have the ability to do it ourselves. I would never disagree with that. In terms of my own personal experiences, I would say that there are a number of opportunities I've had through the support and been able to take advantage of better through the support of SEO or RARE. I still think that I had the ability to do without them, but there's certain tricks of the trade that they knew, or certain nuances about the situation that I wouldn't have been able to traverse on my own. So I'm not going to say they didn't add value to my applications. And so even me specifically, I went through RARE's Target Oxford program, which helps people get into Oxford and Cambridge. People ask me all the time, would you be here without them? I can never say yes, I can never say no. I do know I had the academic ability because the university took me, but because they had people who had been through the process and could tell me a bit more about it and help me guide my way through, it did help me put advantage. It did give me an advantage above some of my other counterparts. So I will acknowledge that they did play a part in some of the places where I've ended up. But I wouldn't say wholeheartedly that I wouldn't be anywhere I am without them.
I think it's to look at it from a different sort of angle. I think it's quite symptomatic of something inside the black community that we're criticizing organizations and companies which, fair enough, they may have their flaws and they may be appealing to a certain group of people, but they have had an impact in several young people's lives. And yes, some people may have been where they wanted to get to without them, but the input is there. It may not be tangible, it may not be visible, but the input in the young person's life is there. I think it's quite symptomatic that we're sort of almost tearing down some of the positive work that these companies and institutions are doing on our behalf.
Thank you, Judy. And we're going to have to stop that topic now and move on to volunteering in Africa and the white savior complex. And I'm quite passionate about this, and I think I've tweeted about it quite a few times. When Becky is on her gap year, you want to go to Africa. You say no. You say, Becky, don't go. There's several reasons. There's several reasons. Because what skills does an 18-year-old have that people living there don't have? What can she bring and add that people there don't already have? And I think there is almost a level of arrogance some of the time when people go and volunteer without a level of skill, or without bringing a skill to wherever they're going. And so we need to question as to what the effect of all these people who are taking gap years and traveling around in Africa are having on the continent. So I know that, Calm, you said you've done a volunteering scheme. Do you want to say a few words on this?
And to butt in, if I may, just briefly, to bring things home for some of the listeners who may be a bit confused about why this is an issue, can you please explain, even if it's you, Calm, when you're coming in, why this is an issue, what this quote-unquote white savior complex thing is, and how it affects how people see and view these volunteering schemes, and how young Africans or the diaspora view that, and how it affects the way they look at Africans and themselves.
Yes, I will. Yes. So yeah, as has been said, I did take part in one of these volunteerist programs. It was a development, quote-unquote, development program, which was in Ghana on behalf of the Department for International Development, and the purpose was to send children from the West over to African continent in various different places to solve the problems that they had there, as if to say that they didn't have the skills or resources themselves to be able to do it. And there was something quite sinister about it, in that if I just think about my own experience, on my team I had a baker from Sainsbury's, a couple people who just finished A-levels, and some of them didn't finish their A-levels. We had a medic, someone from uni, no specific skills at all. We didn't really have a briefing of the project we were going on to until like 2 days before we were going, so it's not like they recruited us specifically for our skill sets. And we're also often working with vulnerable communities, persons with disabilities, without any proper training. And I feel like we did a lot more damage to those people, and even to ourselves, having not been prepared for those kind of experiences, than we did do any gain. And for me, it's definitely a development project, but it's not. It's a personal development project. It's not a development project for the regions we're working in. We're not helping anyone at all. And since I came off that project, I did a lot of research into this kind of area, and I read about case studies where people are going to build orphanages and wells and schools and things of that nature, and people are building stuff in the daytime, which in the nighttime they were paying local people to take down and build properly, so that when you wake up in the morning you feel like you've actually done the job. There's other places where there's now more orphanages and schools than there are teachers and students to fill them, and they keep inviting these Western people to come back and build it because they keep pumping money into the local economy. They get triple charged for taxis, which messes up things, and all these kinds of other things which just add to our idea as the West that, and especially the white savior complex, that we're coming in and saving the day because these people don't physically have the capability to do it themselves. When I think a lot of the time before people go out there and do those things, you need to really think, how much could the money you paid for your flight, for your accommodation, have gone towards providing funding for the local projects that are already there on grassroots level, or training for local people who for the most part, already have more qualifications and experience than any of us.
Thank you very much.
So I think that's something that we really need to think about. But the only specific thing I would say on this point is that I'd like to pick everyone up on the term like white savior complex. Like, it's definitely an issue that we have this imagery that white people can just go over there and save us. And when these countries receive these white people, it makes it look like that they're needed for help at all times. And a lot of the time I had like some white counterparts with me from England, and every time they spoke, everyone would sit up and listen as if what they're saying is gold dust, even though they had no idea what they were talking about. But the only thing I'd say about that is, in many ways, I find that this concept extends to young black professionals in diaspora as well. Like, a lot of people I've met seem to think that they can just go back to Africa with their Western education and their corporate experience and all of a sudden just sort out Africa, as if there aren't sensible, educated people actively working for change in Africa already. And I think a lot of the time we do need to get past our own arrogance, even as black people in the diaspora as well, because I've been to Africa on a number of occasions beyond that voluntarist experience. And fact of the matter, we don't always know better. And I'm really tired of us trying to like wholesale import these Western solutions into an African context, because it doesn't work. Like, we know already, like, me as ACS Vice President at Oxford, I'm not going to go to ACS Birmingham, ACS LSE and tell them this is how you must run your ACS, because it's a different context. And that's just a different place that we need to take into account. Yeah, there are challenges that we can maybe support, and if we have any specific skills, we should go and do that. But don't think just because we have this Western education that we can go over there and save the day, because more time we're going to do more damage than good. So that's my view on the subject.
And I couldn't agree with you more on that.
Thank you very much for that, Calm. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I still be heard?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, great. Okay then, so more on this white savior complex, and as you said, we shouldn't just focus on it being a white issue. We also do the same. Having grown up in the West, some of us feel like we can go and make huge amounts of changes just with our BA or BSc degree. So why do you think there is that complex there? And Shante, maybe you can come in here.
I think a lot of it is, I think this kind of goes back to our first discussion about talking about Black lives and talking about Black people and kind of viewing, viewing Africa, or, to think there's still people out there who think Africa is a country and view this country that is Africa as somewhere that is just completely, that completely cannot function. And I feel like that kind of feeds into this Western ego of, we can save everything. And I feel like a lot of that is perpetuated by the media, and it's perpetuated by a lot of the ads we see on the TV in the train about raising money for Africa. And I think that is very dangerous, and then that kind of fuels this idea that we feel like we can go and save anything amongst Black and white people living in the West.
Yeah, most definitely. And Chidi, you haven't said much on this issue, and I know you probably have an array of thoughts. So do you want to add your 2 cents?
Okay, yes. Yes, I agree with what Shante said. I mean, we see adverts everywhere on the tube, in buses, on billboards, and anytime it's to do with even something so minor, it's always a Black individual there who might be crying out or holding out their hand. With Ebola, it was 3 countries that were primarily affected, yet it was called West Africa. West Africa is made up of several more countries than 3. Africa is called a country by several people. We still have this ideology in the West that because we live in a relatively well-off country, getting almost first-class education in relatively well-off and important universities in the world, we still have this idea that we are the ones that have the keys to the entire world's problems. And it has been mentioned, it's been perpetuated by government. So we see ourselves getting involved in wars that we shouldn't be getting involved in, giving money, foreign aid, and this idea to defend foreign aid budgets and so on.
I think that's a weird one though, because a lot of the time, we kind of, even if you listen to LBC and they're talking about, they constantly debate, should we be cutting aid, and you'll get like, you'll get the Neanderthal Tom who'll call and be like, no, in these countries they have all this stuff and there's just corrupt governments, and but then as soon as you see that starving child from Africa on the TV, you're like, why aren't we doing more stuff? And and it is this, I feel like it is this constant conflict between wanting to feel like you have to save the day all the time, and then, oh no, we should really be looking after our own people, and I feel like that kind of conflicts a lot of people.
Yeah, but a caveat I must mention, this just shouldn't diminish from the good work that several organisations are doing, from people who have been brought up in the UK, have done great things in the UK, and are taking their skills abroad. So I think we should just maintain the balance there.
Yeah, and like
to butt in very quickly, and I would love Melissa to, Mel to come in after this, because I know you've also had an experience in such volunteering schemes. We've had a few interesting tweets, one by Dele in particular. He said, how can we complain about a white savior complex in this question when we spent the whole last question begging for the white Western media?
Wait, can you wait, say that again.
Okay, I'll Dell's just tweeted, how can we complain about a white savior complex in this question when we spent the whole last question begging for the white Western media. So I'm guessing he's talking about us.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying? He was talking about the fact that
what I'm trying to say is, with the media, we were begging them to portray things in a nice, balanced, fair way.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's that much to ask for.
It's not at all.
I don't think it's that much to ask for. I think, yes, I feel like this. We want to be seen as humans. We want to be seen as equal. Can you just portray the media fairly, just as you would for your own people? But can you not look down on us? And I don't think that's too much to ask for. I kind of feel like that's what we're looking for here, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, I just feel like it's a bit of humanity. We're not really asking for money. We're not asking for anything that will take something away from them. We're just asking for them to be fair and to report fairly.
Yeah, like they would with anyone. I don't see a problem.
Yeah.
Mel, I'd also like to hear what you have to say on this, because I know this is a topic you're quite passionate about.
Yeah, so I went to Tanzania and Kenya last summer to do some volunteering work and climb Kilimanjaro. And we went with our university Raise and Give Society, and also now the treasurer on Raise and Give, so I help other students go out and do these volunteering stuff. But this past year I've had a bit of a conflict about it, especially coming back from Tanzania. And basically my main issue was the idea that the other students on the trip had about the people in the countries that we went to, as opposed to the actual work that we were doing, because we kind of knew that we were going to go and do like small things to help this school be built, and it wasn't one of those ones where other people would come and help it. It was literally just painting and so on. But again, like I say, the issue was how other people viewed the locals. Like we walked past a nice car and somebody said, "Ooh, there must be white people around if there's a nice car here."
Oh my god. Oh my god.
And there were so many comments like that. And like, if we went to the market, oh, we must have donated all of these clothes so they can sell. Like they perceived everybody in that country to be lower than them. And again, that does link into the white savior complex, the fact that we've gone all the way across the globe to do volunteering work there. I done a presentation before students went to say that treat it like you're doing volunteering work down the road, but it's a lot harder to do that in practice than to do it in practice than it is to do in principle, because the white people I was the only black person on the trip. All the other white people on the trip just thought that they were doing the biggest favor to these countries that they could ever possibly do, and that these countries owe them so much, and these countries were so more barbaric and so much less developed than we were, and not linking it to things like colonialism and why these countries are in this state. Just it's a shallow understanding of it, and they only understand one single story of it all. Yeah.
And just to briefly cut in, we've got a message from Folabi Oworu, who says, "Us as Africans do a terrible job at helping our people. How many philanthropic organizations do you know that are African-led? We are the ones who understand the problems. Surely the onus is on us or people there if we actually want to sort it out."
That's untrue, though.
Or to provide guidelines to how the aid is given.
I think that conflicts directly.
1 second, let me read the last bit. If the schemes are more effectively directed, is that a solution?
Well, I think the first statement of that was untrue. I think I read somewhere that black people send back to their original countries the most money out of anybody else, any other race. So we provide the most from here, from people that are outside of the continent or outside of the Caribbean. We provide the most money going back. So I wouldn't agree with that. Too tough. But yes, Mel, you were going to say something, I think.
No, I didn't have any. Not at that point.
I think it was just that. It was just because I think the first thing we spoke about when we were discussing this was that also, as young black people living here, we also don't know all the answers. So I kind of feel like in some sense it's wrong to assume that yes, we do know all the issues. I mean, I wouldn't exactly know all the issues that are happening in Dominica right now. So I don't know if I could ever have the standpoint or have the authority to set up an organization to sort out issues I don't know about. And I think that's kind of my kind of stance.
And just to butt in on a few tweets as well, we have a few more from Hannah Okorafor, who says, I think we should also note that Africans on the continent play into this stereotype too. I think that needs to be addressed too, she says. She also says, I think there needs to be a balance. We should call Western media out, but we need efficient and effective black media voices.
I think, yeah, those things kind of linked to, especially what Afolabi said as well. It was that not that black people don't send money home and we don't care about our people. It was more that in terms of charities, a lot of them are led by the West, and why they're not led by Africans or African domestics or to that effect, I believe he was trying to say. And I think in terms of these, like the tweets that you just read out, it's basically saying why are we not taking more responsibility amongst ourselves? Why are we looking to the white savior? Why are Africans within Africa looking to the white savior? And because that's also part of the problem. And I think that with the majority of these issues, there is to be a lot more accountability within ourselves, both the African diaspora and also the Africans in the continent. And I think that Bisayo made an interesting point before when we were talking about Western media. She tweeted something to the effect of we should be trying to establish links with African media rather than begging white media to try and portray our messages. Mm-hmm. And in terms of having our responsibility within Africa, in terms of us, should we be going back to Africa? Should we be starting up charities? Should we be making socially responsible businesses in Africa? Because if you look to the West, yes, there are obviously charities here that attack very serious issues like homelessness and other things. But in terms of day-to-day economics, they don't have to have charities to specifically focus on that because their businesses and their economics is suited to their people as a whole. So I shouldn't say as a whole in general, because obviously we still have the wealth gap, in different classes and things like that. But in Africa, what can we be doing in the diaspora, and what can Africans be doing to ensure that we have enough resources and enough support for our people as a whole? And that's the question that I have, because I don't have the answer to it as well.
Yeah, I think. Oh. Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, I think the issue is really complex. A lot of the issues that Africa does have are structural, and they date back to far in history. And so long as France is still taxing lots of its former colonies, colonial tax, and so long as Western governments still have a massive impact on how African politics is done and so on, none of these charities are going to do a great deal. And so even if we do start making charities, what exactly are we going to do? The issue is so complex, and it really does start right at the top.
Most definitely. Peter, is there any tweets, and what are people saying, and any questions that we need to answer?
Yeah, there are quite a few actually. Sienna says, sorry, but in terms of Africans being home, people send money back to their families often. Remittance is a big thing to us. So that was referring to a previous point.
Yeah, I agree.
We've got Miss Leicestershire, we've got Ruth, who says the charity culture is hugely a Western structure. African culture is not tailored towards charity. It's tailored around family. We have Lepa Shandi, Melanie, who says, we need to show people on the continent that people of their own colour also give back and are worthy of looking up to. And we have Faith Monet, who says, if we are not working on healing and building ourselves and our communities, no one else can, to be honest. The power is in our hands.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's time to move on now. So I'm going to go to the last thing. And Peter, maybe you should come in here because you have an event coming up, right?
Yes. We have an event, shall I say. So this segment is about the lack of education when it comes to Black British civil rights and literally the education on that when it comes to school, when it comes to things we just learn from each other in general. And even Calm, it was you who posted up something on our private Facebook group outlining this and talking about this. So we have an event, Vanguard Connect have an event on this Wednesday up and coming. It's called Lectures and Poetry. And we're basically going to receive a 1-hour lecture from a historian called Tony Warner from the organization Black History Walks. And the topic of discussion, or the topic he's going to give the lecture on, is Black British civil rights. We'll also be an audience of Sienna Bangora's poetry, which should be awesome as well. She's a member of Vanguard Connect. So tickets are available online if you type in www.lecturesandpoetry.eventbrite.com. We do feel it's also an important thing to support and pay and give back to those who help us and by that I'm talking about the lecturer and poet. And I feel quite passionate about this in particular because a lot of the time, as bodies that represent African and Caribbean communities, whether that may be ACSs or others, we can very quickly get into a culture of paying for things when it comes to entertainment. Like when with our culture shows, a lot of the time we tend to bring on rappers or Afrobeats artists, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I also think we need to pay and support those who bring benefit and educate us, because a lot of the people who do educate us find it hard to find places to teach us.
Great. And could you tell them the time and the date, etc.?
Yeah, so as I said, it's this upcoming Wednesday. It is on the 15th of April 2015. It's at UCL. The time is 6 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Great. And so you guys are going to touch on, or say we will touch on Claudia Jones and the Black History movement in the UK as a whole. So, as Peter said, if you want to know more, want to learn more, go ahead and attend the event. And Peter, if you do want to tweet the link,
definitely,
so that,
definitely, we will tweet the link. The team will tweet the link. I was also going to say this is our Easter gathering as well, so you can come down, and it's a social event as well. There will be food and drinks there, so it's an invite open to anyone for any age as well. Something that you can go in, get educated, you can learn something that you perhaps weren't taught before, and can go out and also use that to empower other people by sharing this.
Okay, great. And we're going to have to go on to the last topic now, because we're running out of time, and that is the UK and the Nigerian elections. As we both know, as we all know, we've probably seen hashtag Nigeria Decides, and I think yesterday there were votes for states. I was seeing hashtags like hashtag Lagos Decide, and I think it's, and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, and I want you to come in here. For the past 15 years, PDP have been running the country and have been elected for 15 years, and this week APC has now been elected as the new government of Nigeria. But Peter, could you just give us a bit more of a background, or Chidi, you might also want to come in here, a bit more of a background as to the Nigerian elections and why there has been such a change, why it's taken 15 years for there to be such a change.
Yeah, I'll talk very briefly. I'll let Chidi, the speaker Chidi talk more about this. But the reason we brought this up is the idea of the fact that people do have power. That many people within Nigeria were sick and tired of a lot of things that were going on and have been going on for God knows how many years. And a lot of young people in particular decided to stand up and vote. And this led to the recent change in government, as we all know, with President Muhammad Buhari, and people are optimistic and hoping that this will lead to a more optimistic Nigeria. And we've heard all sorts of things to do with corruption in the past and things we won't really go into, but the particular reason why we brought this up was to relate it to the upcoming UK elections. Us as young people, especially within the African and Caribbean communities, there's a lack of voter turnout. And speaking to a lot of my peers, actually, we don't know, or we don't believe, we don't feel that a lot of politicians or parties represent us. And it's just a thing of encouraging us that, okay, if this is the case, there are things, or there are alternatives to this than just staying at home. There's something, for instance, called spoiling your vote, which I was talking to one of my friends about the other day, and he didn't know what it meant. And it's basically a vote of no confidence. Or sorry, just ticking a box that basically says none of the above. And this is quite important when it does come to voting, because people who vote have power. Politicians care about voters. And if your vote is counted as saying none of the above, they can see that you do have a voice, and they can see that you feel that they don't represent you. Yeah. And why this is important in particular is because, as a lot of us would know, recently the tuition fees have increased from 9 grand to 27k. And again, I'll relay it back to the fact that politicians care about voters. If you check, I don't really want to talk about the benefits that pensioners get, but I'm sure many of us do know about it, from the free transport to just a lot of benefits you get when you become 65, and that's because they have largely a higher voter turnout than us. So they have a voice. They use their political power, if that makes sense. Whereas we don't. We, just because we don't agree with certain things, we sit at home and say, or a lot of us sit at home and say, I'm not going to vote. This system is anti or it's against me.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as voting or spoiling your vote. So that's really what I wanted to bring to the table and allow people like Shantae who have some insight on this to talk on it.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Shantae.
So yeah, I think it's quite interesting that we're kind of talking particularly about people from ethno-minority backgrounds engaging in these elections. It's really important, you have things like Operation Black Vote, Operation Disabled Vote, encouraging women to vote. A lot of people from these marginalized communities, getting them engaged in the political system, because it's really important. And then I don't know if anyone saw today, we were kind of briefly talking about the little ongoing argument that was happening between me and Jay and me on Twitter, when he kind of said, I'm not going to vote, the system's broken, so I'm just going to stay at home and not vote. And it is a really toxic, poisonous attitude. And even though he kept saying, I'm not telling young people not to vote, I'm just saying I don't want to. But when you're a voice that resonates with a lot of young people who should really be engaging in the political system, or who haven't thought about engaging in it, and you've kind of just already turned them off. And it's so important to have that involvement in things, because I'm not saying that your vote is your voice. Of course it's not. Your vote is one way in which you cast your interest, in which you cast your thoughts and opinions on politics into the bigger and wider world, but it is not your voice. And I just feel like it is a terrible attitude to say, oh, I'm not going to engage in voting because nothing really works out for me. Then vote X, don't vote for any of the above, spoil your ballot, because that way at least people know you're interested, and they know you're not just apathetic and don't care. They know you're interested and you're angry, and things can happen off the back of that. But yeah.
So is there a political party that has said anything about race relations so far? Does anybody know?
Oh, well, and if you're talking negatively, there's a lot of stuff out there. But I mean,
I'm talking about specifically for this election.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like no particular party has said anything that I can think of right now that stands out like with race. But I know that there's a strong emphasis on a lot of parties to have parliamentary candidates that are diverse, and it's something that they get pulled up on a lot, and I think that's something that they want to change. But in particular, I don't think so, which is why I kind of think it's more important to look at the issues that affect our community, and look at the policies that are promoted by other parties, and kind of look at how that resonates with you. So at Sienna's event, we kind of looked at we couldn't exactly look at what party represents black women, but we looked at, okay, what are the issues that black women face in terms of health, crime, and what is it that parties are proposing, and then choosing who you want to vote for on that basis. And if that doesn't impress you, then vote none of the above.
And what are these policies that you're talking about when you said policies that are affecting our communities? Could you give us
I'm trying to think. So we kind of looked at things like mental health within the black community, and what different parties are doing in terms of looking at the NHS and looking at funding for mental health. And as mental health becomes an issue that we feel more comfortable to talk about, and we're breaking the stigma around, parties are coming out saying, things they want to do about mental health, things they want to do with the NHS, and kind of looking at what appeals to you as an individual and how you want to vote on those things.
Okay. And so as a black voter, are you going to tell us who you would vote for? If you can just say that we're a homogenous group, which you can't, but maybe if you speak from an individual standpoint.
Does anyone else want to comment? I feel like I'm taking over this conversation.
Can I ask some questions?
Go ahead.
I'll admit, and I'll be that guy and say that I'm actually not registered to vote. I didn't have any. I wasn't interested.
You got time.
Yeah, 20th of April.
But now having this conversation, I'm interested to understand how that specifically applies to us as the BMU community. I understand you said that we can try and look for policies which most reflect us, which I'm not too up to date on. But Peter made the comparison between young people and tuition fees and old people and pensions, which makes a lot of sense to me. But in terms of black specific issues, if we're acknowledging that there aren't too many parties that are even acknowledging they exist, let alone making policies about them, how is it that I feel that my vote is going to have any impact
They're not.
Anything really.
The reason.
Can I
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, they're not speaking about us because we're not voting. After the votes happen, every party is going to get a rundown of what kind of people have voted, ages, ethnicity, area, and so on. And that's probably going to be a lot of what they're going to base their next manifesto on. Based on so in that sense, if more black people were voting, then there would probably be a lot more policies about things that affect black people.
But even still, I think it's important to add that I personally believe one of the major reasons as to why BME, particularly the black vote, is not recognised is because a lot of black people tend to vote the same way all the time in a sort of tribalistic fashion, which is to vote for, in this country, for the Labour Party. Now, nothing wrong with the Labour Party. There's nothing wrong with having a left-wing ideology, and nothing wrong with having a right-wing ideology. But if you're going to vote for the same side all the time without thinking about the issues or about how a party has provided for you or enacted policies in your favour, then you exercise a form of a voice, but the voice without power. In other words, the party you're voting for becomes very complacent. Because
I agree. I do agree with that.
Would you say that's Labour in this sense, Judy?
I'm sorry?
Would you say that's Labour if we're talking about?
Of course, it's Labour. It's almost heresy to say you vote Conservative as a black person.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Why would you vote Conservative as a black person?
That's my point. That very ideology needs to be stamped out.
No, but I'm asking you. Stamp out. Why would we?
I see. Once you balance up the issues, for some people, voting Conservative might be a more wiser thing to do, and they might have policies that are favourable to them. Well, but my point is that if you vote a certain way all the time, a group of people, the party you vote for loses interest because they become complacent, and the party you don't vote for recognizes that they'll never get your vote, so they don't even bother to try. I think the key to this is to become a lot more free-thinking. Then the parties will recognize that, yes, this is a block vote that we need to appeal to in order to swing them to our direction.
Yeah, so, sorry, Cam.
That's it.
So you're saying that, and I think you're correct, and I even remember learning this in an academic book during GCSE citizenship, that the black vote goes proportionately completely higher. I think it's like if let's just say 70% to Labour, and you're saying that Conservatives have policies which may affect us, but could you which may be of advantage to us, but could you give us an example of some of those policies?
So I've had a look at the previous manifestos from 2010. There were a lot of things about businesses, and a lot of black people tend to be business-minded, finance-driven, and so on. Businesses which were quite appealing in terms of tax cuts for certain businesses, income tax cuts as well, which have been enacted throughout this government. The idea that you should be a lot more freer in terms of being a person of society, not having as much government control, and so on. So I'm not advocating a certain party here, in case just in case the community goes crazy. But
Can I just jump?
It's important to criticize three things. You criticize the candidate, the policies, and the party. Don't vote tribalistically.
Can I just say, I personally don't think it's fair to say that all black people vote tribalistically. I think that a lot of how people vote is based on their economic position in this country, and Labour is more akin to a lot of black people's economic position in the country due to the structures that this country is built upon. And even if because last year our system was a lot more two-party / street party, it would have been Labour. But I think this year the Green Party has had a massive surge, and I think that the Green Party, if people have seen the Green Party's new party election broadcast, it starts with a black woman. I've never ever seen any party do such a thing, and I think that was a pivotal moment in the Green Party saying that they care about black people's votes, they care about women. And and even though they are, the fact that they are still left wing, I do think that they give an alternative to Labour, and so I don't think it's tribalistic.
Do you think we're being idealistic by thinking that any political party will care that much about issues that affect ethnic minorities, or as I like to say, global majorities.
Thank you very much. That was my question from the beginning. I think I don't really see how any of these parties are ever going to be able to implement any policies which are going to be specific to us and really address our issues, even if we show them that we have some sort of significant voting power.
Why?
I mean, the reason I think that is because, well, statistically we don't make up enough of the population. But furthermore, I think that I think.
Works.
Pardon?
Sorry to interrupt, but that's not how politics works. You know, we have constituencies in the UK.
No, I understand, but you're talking about appealing to the black vote as if it's going to really sway a lot of the decisions, right? And I'm saying that we don't make up that much.
We don't vote as a 66 million country. We vote in constituencies, and if you mobilise certain people in certain communities, the black community can have an influencing voice.
Okay, all right, fine. Let me take it from there then. First of all, I forgot. I wanted to say I don't really like the idea that we're using this term tribalistic in respect to our people at any time. But moving on from that, I think that it's important to recognize that structurally and in their genesis, all of these parties were designed in the interest of white supremacy. And when I say that, it's not just against black people. You know, when we talk about white supremacy, it's male landed gentry white supremacists. You know, it's like just the same way that these parties don't really show women enough interest. You know, no matter how many women we get in parliament, it's never going to change the patriarchal structure of parliament in its instance. Until we start gutting out the whole system, it's not going to change anything because we have a few black faces at the front of this party, or we make a few minor policies which are going to please us here and there. Structurally, inherently, none of these parties were designed to support ethnic minorities or ethnic minority issues. So I understand that we might get a few concessions here or there to try and keep this party in power or that party in power, but fundamentally, I don't see how any amount of voting on our behalf is going to change their interest and their agenda so that they're going to start making policies that are actually going to help us to progress actively in this country. And if someone can tell me that how they think that's going to happen, then I'd be interested to hear it.
I think it's important to have allies within Parliament, even if they aren't directly affecting the way we live. If something does come up along the line, like for instance, before however long, there wouldn't have been like race relation acts, there wouldn't have been things that would help black people with discrimination in the country. And if we didn't have those allies within Parliament, then I don't think that such acts would have had such an easy passage. And I do think that comes from the votes of ethnic minorities.
Okay.
I think there's some truth in that, definitely. Okay, so Peter, how are we doing for time?
Yeah, so we are gonna have to round up soon. We were actually supposed to have someone else on the show who came in around now, who comes in around now, called Michael Saney. He's the CEO of an organization called Bite the Ballot, but he's also having some technical difficulties. And the reason being because I wanted to encourage us to use one of the applications that Bite the Ballots have developed, and it's on a website called and the website's www.verto, so that's verto.vote, VOTE. And the reason being what this does in particular is a tool that allows users to see how their views and values align with the current political parties. So we've got a lot of tweets from Vedette in particular who says, can someone outline any of these parties' policies that affect and represent me? So this app in particular is really good. So I would say that if any people who are listening, please do try or go on this website, and it's an app as well. I'll repeat it. It's www.verto.vote.
And just to add for everyone, the website will touch upon things which may not be high on your list. So it will touch on maybe crime or the environment or nuclear weapons. So politics is a lot more than just our individual, what can be done for us. It's more about community and society. So it will ask you about those questions as well.
Yeah, and I guess can I quickly add, we didn't really get to speak a lot about kind of black civil rights, and I feel like that's a really important aspect to look at. It's not only your vote that makes your voice heard, it's also about what you say, how you speak up, how many people are actually engaged in campaigning and promoting the issues that we face in our communities, and perhaps that's a more effective way for people to understand what we're actually going through, and by doing that implement policies that actually affect us as well. So it's a lot more about just showing up at the ballot box. And also one small thing I just realized, there are I think 168 marginal seats in which the ethnic minority vote is higher than the current incumbent MP. So I feel like we do have a lot lot of vote power, but we also have the power of our own voices. So, you know, don't be afraid to speak up on the issues that affect you. And this is a great platform to do so. And I just think it's about ensuring that people in the right places are hearing the issues that we're facing and making a change on that. So, yeah.
And to just butt in again very briefly, Michael has sent me a message on Twitter saying that the main theme of Verto is to use digital tools as a catalyst to engage the generation, and it's to understand the system so we can pick it apart and rebuild it.
Great.
So, yeah, I think we should start rounding up because we have gone a bit over.
So thank you to all the speakers for joining us. Very, very insightful. I've learned a lot. I'm sure people listening have learned a lot, and hopefully we've learned from each other. I want to say to all this, thank you for listening. Thank you for communicating via Twitter. I will be going on Twitter afterwards and replying to all the tweets that we didn't get a chance to read out, or try my best to. Please do subscribe to this channel. 27th Podcast has a lot going out next month on YouTube, so if you want to keep in touch, do so. And if you want to keep in touch with us via Twitter, then I think our link is in the description box. Same for Vanguard Connect. Peter, is there anything you want to say before wrapping up?
I wanted to thank the speakers once more and hand it over to them if they want to talk a bit about solutions in regards to a lot of the challenges we face. We have touched on solutions, but I know you guys had things to say in particular. And Mel, you had something to highlight when it comes to Black British civil rights.
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly say, like I said earlier on in the podcast, there's only 17 Black female professors, and out of 18,500 professors in the entire UK, 85 of them are Black in total. And I think that really links to Black British civil rights. We don't have an identity because there's nobody in academia theorizing about our existence. And I think that we map ourselves so much onto African American identities because they do have a lot more. They are a lot more prevalent in academic spaces, and due to like mass media, global connections, we can view their lives, we can see it, and I think that kind of takes away the need for us to create our own identity. And even within, like, I'm really interested in feminism. Even within Black British feminism, it's an area that's dominated largely by Asian women. And so I think it all just feeds into the fact that if nobody's in academia theorizing about our existence, then our identities is just going to be null and void to some extent. And like I was saying earlier as well, all these companies are helping us get into the corporate world, but nobody's saying anything about Black people getting into academia. It's such an expensive route to go down. And since no corporate companies are paying anyone, it seems that we're just going to stay in the exact same position, mapping ourselves onto African Americans when we do have a very distinct history of colonialism now, and especially sorry, I'm going on a bit, but especially now that I think we're at a pivotal moment personally. I'm personally a third generation identity in this country. So both my parents were born here, and my grandparents came here, and so I don't speak my language back in Ghana, and so, but I'm not accepted in this country. And I think that, and as time goes on, all of us are here now, and we might have children here, they're going to have children here, they're ever going to be distanced from our countries that we come from in Africa. And I think that now is a pivotal time that we need to start beginning to look at these areas and start theorizing about our own identities and creating our own identities. So, yeah.
Hence why lectures on poetry on Wednesday is important to come to.
Yes, yes.
Chidi, did you have anything to say?
I've just got 3 things to say. Number one, if you haven't registered to vote, please register to vote. It's very important. Your vote is important. People have died and have fought for these things in the past, so please exercise it. Number 2, lectures on poetry this coming week. See us on Facebook. Please attend. And number 3, personally, there's a lot we can do in our sort of individual worlds that we know where we come across people. So I'm tutoring at the moment. I focus a lot of my effort towards people who look like me and those who tend to come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So there's no harm in using your efforts in your personal backgrounds to prop up the community around you.
Fantastic. And Shante?
Yeah, I just kind of want to add to what Chidi said in terms of, make sure you're registered to vote. We're 3 times less likely to be registered to vote than our white counterparts, and I feel like a lot of this feeling that, we're never going to change anything comes from us not being on the register. Even if you don't vote, make sure your presence is recorded on the electoral register, because it means that you're counted in. It means that politicians know they have to work for your vote. Don't feel like you have to vote for Labour because you're black. And I feel like I kind of fell into that trap when I first got involved in politics. And just please engage. Things can change with democracy, and I know I kind of sound a bit like delusional, but I do believe in the power of democracy, but only if people participate in it. That's what democracy is, power of the people. And if we don't ever participate in what makes changes and what implements policy in our society, how can we ever see it reflect us? And I just think it's really important to get involved and get engaged. You got until 20th of April, you have time, do it. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know, and really make your mark and make the BME footprint known in this election, because I don't want it to be another government that completely just, forgets the faces of all the coloured people here.
I love that, make your BME footprint. Calm, have you got anything to say rounding up?
Yeah, I would say that initially I said that I wasn't interested in the idea of voting, but I can honestly say, having listened to some of the points that were made, I can see there might be some value in registering and having a strategic kind of vote. So I would definitely actually look into that. In terms of the other issues, which are about SEO and RARE and even our media presence and stuff like that, I think that is a lot to do with us trying to take responsibility and reclaiming and putting a lot of energy into our own communities to try and change these things, whether it be just local community projects, educating each other on Black history and African history wherever we find it, wherever we have the opportunity. Also just understanding that, especially in regards to these big firms and these big initiatives, whether it be in Parliament, whether it be in corporate, looking for diversity, that beyond that we have a responsibility amongst ourselves, and that we shouldn't just be looking for initiatives to fall from the top, and we should be trying to build stuff up of our own. So that was our final thoughts.
Thank you. Guys, you have been talking fire all evening, and sadly we have to wrap up now. Thank you again, once again, for joining us. Yes. Thank you also for the listeners. I know we started late. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your continued support. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Lastly, just wanted to say a big thank you to people who are supporting. We got a lot of support this time, especially with our newly made VC podcast team. So I wanted to say again a big shout out and thank you to Sarah, Raifa, Afolabi, Ruth Busayo, Mel, Doreen, and again to our speakers Carmel, Chidi, and Shante, and obviously to Naomi.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, thank you very much, and hopefully this will be the last goodbye. Wait, can I just say one thing?